Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. Massive matchup, not only in the SEC, but really the college football playoff landscape. Ole Miss heading on the road to play LSU. LSU coming off a bye. You look at this Ole Miss team and Dill, very frustrating loss against Kentucky. The offense just couldn't find its rhythm against what I think is a very good Kentucky defense. That being said, one of the most under talked about storylines about this Ole Miss team, and it's because the offense struggled, was how good this Ole Miss defense is, not only against Kentucky and South Carolina, but how good they've been all year on the defensive side of the football. 9 points per game allowed, number 3 in the country, only allowing 1.9 yards per carry. That's number 2 in the country. Yeah, the Ole Miss offense has struggled. It hasn't necessarily found its rhythm. That being said, don't let that distract you from how good I think this Ole Miss defense is, specifically in the front seven against South Carolina. 6 sacks, 10 tackles for a loss. Go back to Kentucky, 5 sacks, 9 tackles for a loss. They are sacking the quarterback 5 times per game, number 1 in the country. We said this going into the season. Like, on paper, this Ole Miss defense, specifically in that front seven, feels a little bit different. It certainly has looked different to start 2024. And if this Ole Miss offense can just kind of find its rhythm like we saw last year, this is a really dangerous football team. Going on the road and playing an LSU offense that can attack you in a lot of different ways. This is going to be a phenomenal football game. Fired up to get into it. Now, before we do, and as always, and most importantly for this game, let it fly in the comment section. Dill, I don't know if we agree on this football game. I'm sure many of y'all aren't going to agree with some of our takes. That's the beauty of doing it. So let it fly in the comment section. Score predictions in general. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, let's get into this one. Let's start with this Ole Miss offense going up against an LSU defense where I think this is an obvious mismatch that if you're Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, you're going to want to attack this LSU secondary.
Yeah, and you want to get yourself back on track with this game because the past couple of weeks you haven't seen the same rhythm. I think you kind of said it. Like, they obviously were overmatched the teams they played to start that season. Lane Kiffin even said it. Like, they didn't really prepare them for the SEC, and you kind of saw that. Like, my one concern is they're having a little bit of trouble, it feels like, getting the ball to anyone besides Trey Harris. And Trey Harris is a monster, and he should be getting the ball a lot. But I mean, especially in the Kentucky game, I got a little concerned when you see, like, the offense not exactly humming, and then, like, the get out of jail card is, well, we'll just throw it to Trey Harris a zillion times. Like, they got to do a better job attacking every blade of grass. I feel like that's what made them so good last year, is they were getting the ball to everyone. They had a bunch of weapons to go to. And then when Trey Harris finally got healthy, you really saw him start humming. Right now, I do feel like they're just really trying to force feed Trey Harris. They got to get Juice Wells more involved, get Caden Lee, these other guys on the Watkins. Like, they
got so many weapons, Dill, and it was frustrating because it's like, all right, we know Trey Harris is a stud. I want him to be featured too, but you also have another stud in Juice Wells. You got a great tight end in Caden Prescorn. You have a run game that I think can be utilized as well. They just didn't seem to be utilizing all the weapons they had on this offense. That's a storyline. I think the bigger storyline is just a little bit of inconsistency with Jackson Dart pushing the ball down the field. We've seen Jackson Dart make massive strides in terms of attacking the deeper third, but the last 2 games, even South Carolina, like, yeah, you won easily. That's kind of on the backs, in my opinion, on the Ole Miss defense. Though the last 2 games for Jackson Dart, 3 of 19, 20-plus yards down the field. And I think the bigger problem is this is an Ole Miss offense that's very reliant on pushing the ball down the field. Almost 30% of his attempts the last 2 games have gone 20-plus yards down the field. This is an Ole Miss offense that wants to rely on that. This is an LSU secondary that has been giving up the explosive play. Is this the game that we can see Jackson Dart find his stride and find his kind of chemistry with his pass catchers pushing the ball down the field? Because if they do, I think it could be a long night for this LSU defense.
And the issue with LSU's defense inherently, and why I think they don't exactly match up great against Ole Miss, is like, they just don't have the guys in the secondary right now to do a Blake Baker. I mean, last year they're kind of like converting from a very bend but don't break kind of soft zone system. Blake Baker is very comfortable, wants to challenge offense. He wants to challenge wide receivers. He wants to play some more man coverage than what you saw from last year. And right now, you just don't see enough consistency from these cornerbacks making plays on the ball, being sticky in the way you got to be sticky to play the way they want to play. So Ole Miss, again, I mean, Zy Alexander has probably been the one bright spot, in my opinion, for this LSU team. But You look at Ole Miss, they have enough weapons to really start stressing the depth, getting to some of their matchups and some guys who, frankly, for LSU just haven't been making it happen in the back end. Having said that, Ole Miss has to kind of find their
They
way.
got to do it. They got to find their matchups. Like, this is partially a big storyline. Is all right. If Zy Alexander's on Trey Harris, assuming Trey Harris in the health, I know he left the South Carolina game. You're going to have some other matchups. Like, you look at Sage Ryan, you look at Major Burns. They've struggled in coverage. If you're Ole Miss, can you find those matchups? Can you rely on guys like Juice Wells or Caden Prescorn or Jordan Watkins to go win? And can Jackson Dart
And
look
I
for
think
those
if they
guys?
can start getting some other spots and getting, like, again, attacking all blades of grass, if you will, I think that gives them a better shot to open things up down the field. Because right now I feel like teams are kind of playing into what they want to do. They're not necessarily forcing them to, or possibly giving, frankly, Jackson Dart more options underneath. He's just not always taking them. It doesn't feel like. I think he has to get back to, like, being a little bit more patient, taking what the defense gives him. I think Lane Kiffin also needs to help him out in that regard, in working some of that horizontal stuff that they were good with last year, and then being able to find their stuff over the top. Because right now it feels like, well, we're just going to force feed the ball down the field, and they're not really getting anything to set that up right now.
This Ole Miss offense is quite reliant on the deep ball. One of the storylines, and you said Blake Baker doesn't quite have the personnel to play how he wants. Like, he was able to do that against Missouri, or at Missouri, because he had NFL caliber cornerbacks. So you can send your front seven, you can send some safeties and leave your cornerbacks on islands. When you have cornerbacks that can operate on islands, I just don't know if LSU has those guys. So if LSU decides to bring heat, can Ole Miss again attack that deeper third?
And you also, I think, if you're going to play Ole Miss really tough, you got to be able to expose their offensive line, because that's been the one thing that, like, I think we hoped it was going to look. Ole Miss fans certainly would have hoped it looked really, really good, adding some of those transfer pieces, and it's been solid. I don't want to. I think so. Frankly, I think it's gone a little far in criticizing of them, but they haven't been particularly great in the last two games. And good defensive lines for sure, but they haven't been amazing in pass.
That's the second big question: is can
LSU have the horses to do it?
Yeah, and they got some guys. Like, to be honest, the front seven has been a pleasant surprise for me. Like, they've been good against the run. They've been solid in the pass rush. I think it's been more their secondary. But is this an LSU front seven specifically on the defensive line that can get Jackson Dart off his spot? Because you're right, the pockets have been muddy. Jackson Dart has been dropping his eyes pretty often. That's the other question mark you have. And
Perkins, I will say, I think does not help that, because he is obviously, his ability to come in pressures like from that second level, it's really, really good. And that has been a big part of LSU, at least making some of their plays, has been relying on him, because he's an individual grade. So him going down, I mean, it puts even more pressure on those guys on the edge, like the Swinsons, the Shans, like those guys who, again, I think are good players. Are they great players? I don't think they've shown that yet. They need to play like great right now against Ole Miss.
Let's flip the sides here. Let's talk about this LSU offense that they got to operate better in the red zone. Like, they're scoring 33 points per game. That's nice, 31st in the country, but they got 7 yards per play. That's number 12 in the country. So if you're LSU, one of the storylines in this football game is, both offenses might be able to move the football. Like, which offenses are going to score 7 points when you get into the red zone? That's certainly a question mark. Dill, this is the test for the Ole Miss front seven. Like, again, Kentucky offensive line, question mark. South Carolina offensive line, not very good. LSU's offensive line, quite good. What is the front seven matchup? Dude, you've had so many guys step up for Ole Miss. I mean, they can attack you in so many different ways, whether it's on the inside with guys like Walter or JJ, who I think has massively improved what he can do as a pass rusher, or on the edge. You didn't even have Princely U last game. Still had a really good pass rush. Jared Ivey, Princely. You look at Suntarian Perkins, might be the best player on this Ole Miss defense right now. I think the biggest storyline is, can this Ole Miss front seven impact Garrett Nussmeier in the pocket? That's going to be a phenomenal battle. I think it's one of the better pass rush units versus one of the better offensive lines. That's going to be something, get your popcorn, because it's going to be a very good battle.
And that'll kind of tell, like, I'm not totally ready to anoint this Ole Miss defensive line as like great yet. If they really play good football against LSU, that'll be I think, again, you kind of said it. They haven't played great offensive lines. Like, those opposing teams, South Carolina, Kentucky, certainly have been good on the defensive front. Those aren't great offensive lines. I think you've seen a lot of really good things. I love the way Walter Nolan's playing. He's giving them those big, high-impact plays that I think you wanted to see. Perkins is doing that. Princely's doing that. So they're getting their guys to make those plays you need to make. If they start making them against the LSU offensive line, Campbell, and the rest of that crew, then I'll kind of think like, well, this LSU or Ole Miss defense isn't just like, again, they've been kind of good at times in the past. I'll be ready because like, okay, this is a legitimately high level SEC.
Yeah, and I think the second storyline is just making sure you're tackling in space. This Ole Miss secondary will give you some of the short stuff, right? They're giving up a 63% completion percentage. That's 84th in the country. Nothing to write home about, but only 6.2 yards per pass attempt. That's 24th. So like we're coming up and tackling really well. If you're Ole Miss, you're going to have to do that against LSU because we got a lot of different guys, not only that can work vertically down the field, but you mix in some guys like Aaron Anderson, who LSU has been really, really good at getting involved in terms of getting the football in his hands.
LSU's offense is kind of clicking the way I almost wish Ole Miss would click. Like they're getting their guys.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of different skill sets in that room, and they're using them all. They're getting guys like CJ Daniels to work down the field. They obviously have a guy like Aaron Anderson who can work underneath, can also pop one down the field as well. So I think they're utilizing more of the field in a sense than LSU or Ole Miss is doing on offense, and that's putting some pressure on defenses. I will say, I think Ole Miss's team speed on defense is much better than what it's, especially from that linebacker spot. I mean, Doherty and Chris Paul Jr. are really, really athletic linebackers. I think they've played really good football, and they've done a really good job tackling. I think you kind of said it, like their ability to tackle guys and get them to the ground is at a much higher level than I think we've seen in past Ole Miss teams.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll mention before we get into LSU's been running the football well. They just haven't been running that often, right? I mean, 5.2 yards per carry, 23rd in the country, pretty damn good. They're only running it 40% of the time. That's 123rd. The emergence of Caden Durham, like not only as a ball carrier, but as a pass catcher, dude's a difference maker. Loved him out of high school in Duncanville, Texas, has come to LSU, has given him a ton of juice. Just another playmaker that you add to this offense.
And I think that was a good recipe for Kentucky. On the drives they could get the run game going, I think they helped slow the pass rush down because you look, Walter Nolan, Prince, those guys want to get after it. They want to rush the pass. They want to be able to get upfield. If you can really kind of just lean on them and run the ball and be physical, I think that's a good way to slow that pass rush down, which has been kind of the key, I feel like, to what Ole Miss is doing on defense.
Yeah, the Ole Miss offense versus LSU defense, I think that's a mismatch a little bit. Like I think you're thinking if you're an Ole Miss fan, you can maybe attack the deeper third and really get it going against the secondary. This LSU offense versus Ole Miss defense is going to be just a fascinating matchup. Let's get to the pick. Ole Miss on the road, 3.5-point favorites. Dill, who you got?
I love the Rebels. I think people have kind of way overreacted
to that
Kentucky loss. I said Ole Miss was in control of that game for the most part. I feel like I saw some people in our comment section being like, what were you watching? I was like, I don't know. What were you watching? I thought Ole Miss was clearly the better team in that football game. It took a Herculean play. I mean, a 4th and 10, you go for 80 yards. Like, okay, you make that play. You can win that type of game. Ole Miss was the better team. I'm a little hesitant only because Ole Miss's offense, I mean, they're going to have to score a lot of points because LSU is going to get theirs. Like, I kind of see this game being like high 20s for LSU, maybe low 30s, mid 30s for Ole Miss. That's kind of how I see it. Now, to do that, Ole Miss needs to kind of show something on offense and be more explosive, maybe be more creative, and get some more guys involved than just Trey Harris if they're going to kind of cover the spread.
I got Ole Miss too. I think this is what the doctor ordered for Ole Miss on offense. I think South Carolina's defense is actually quite good. Kentucky's defense is obviously very good. I don't think LSU's defense is very good. So if you're Ole Miss and you're looking for a game to, again, you're going on the road at LSU. Like, I don't like betting against LSU in these situations. It's one of the best environments in all of college football. Dill, I just have too much confidence in Lane Kiffin and these weapons. Like, at some point, it's going to click. And if it's going to click, it's going to click against this LSU secondary. And I think you're right. I think it could be a little bit of a shootout game, but then it's like, all right, what defense do I trust a little bit more to make some negative plays and kill some drives? It's this Ole Miss defense. So I'm going to take Ole Miss 3.5 points here. Going to be a very, very fun game, electric environment. Fired up for it. Let it fly in the comment section in terms of how you guys are feeling, and we'll talk to y'all later.